We need a structure that takes us through that transformation to finding the true self, to arriving at the true conclusion of the nature of our true self. If we don't have that methodology, that system, we'll waste most of our time because our life is not that long. We don't have 1,000 years.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions. I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado, and I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado. How are you, Rob?
Good to be here.
And we are continuing our series on spiritual psychology. And today we're talking about the power of staying in one path, one spiritual discipline. And before we start, I want to invite you all to subscribe to our channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, click the button here below. Or if you are listening to us on one of the many podcast services, don't miss another episode and make sure you hit subscribe on that service so you can make sure you don't miss a bite of this information. What do you think?
That's right.
Okay, so today, Rob, we're going to talk about why we need to stay on one path and the benefit of that versus the multi-path phenomenon.
Yeah, so it's about choosing a path because often, people come to the work with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different concepts and trainings, and that's great. I think that's an important piece. There's a period of your time and your life early on that you should explore. You should kind of not choose yet.
Yeah, like when you're in your 20s, or you're sort of in that exploration, figuring out who you are, and so you may do lots of different things, dabble in a lot of different things to kind of like figure out what you believe, because I think many of us now are spiritual but not religious, so we don't have that religion to rely upon to guide us. So we have a lot of spiritual, not religious people that are out there just trying to figure it out. Well, what do I do? What do I believe? And with the internet right now, there is so much information out there that you can easily get lost. And it's almost as if you never want to make that decision because you keep moving away. So let's start with why, what causes us to have this seeking of spiritual knowledge in the first place.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I want to dedicate this episode to our master's students.
Oh, yeah.
We enjoy working with you guys so much. Thank you for your passion and dedication to the work. Yes, so why is it important? This is from the Rig Veda. It says, the truth is one. The wise call it by many names. So what it's saying is every path will get you there. Every path, if you follow it, and if it's a genuine path of spirituality, of mind development, personal development, it will reach that truth. It will get you there. But you need to follow that path. It also says that when the self is not realized, and I'm paraphrasing, but when the self is not realized, meaning when you don't understand the true nature of your mind and the true nature of reality, it acts like an enemy towards you. It actually hurts you. It comes, your mind, your consciousness, your essence, your soul, as Jung would say. It essentially acts like an enemy because we're meant to develop this powerful persona ego, this personality that we identify with, but we're also meant to transcend it. We're not meant to stay there. And when people stay there, they don't follow the next step, or they don't bother to find the meaning of what's beyond their persona.
And then it becomes this like a lack of fulfillment or something missing. constant like looking externally for rewards and this kind of like wanting more, never feeling like life is enough.
Well, I think in the best case scenario, that would be the case. But in the worst case scenario, individuals, because consciousness then becomes a burden to them, they don't know what to do with this awareness. It bothers them. It's like a thorn in the flesh, that it's always putting pressure on you to grow, to do something. And because you don't have the wherewithal, the tools or the knowledge to do something with it, all you can do is try to obliterate it, try to avoid it, try to distract yourself at best, and at worst, use drugs, alcohol, shopping, TV, anything like that to
Money, achieving money to drown it out. Like if I just make
yeah.
another $1 million, I'll be happy.
That's right. So the mind then acts against you. It becomes an enemy towards you. Not only passively that you're not using it, it actually starts to work against you, to hurt you.
So when you say mind, can we talk about what the mind is in the Jungian psychology Jungian coaching?
Yeah, because there are different definitions.
Because people think
of
the mind is the brain, like, oh, it's my brain. That's what, or just thoughts, my thoughts.
Yeah.
Which is all part of it, but it's not the whole picture.
Right. So a simple definition is this: the brain is the hardware, right? You look at your computer, that's the brain. It's the wires and the metal and the glass and the screen that makes up the computer. That's the brain. It's the physical housing of the and part of the body, right? That is the physical expression of mind. And the mind is the software, the programs that are running, the images and the meaning in those images. So it's very different. You cannot define that meaning by looking at the computer, at the hardware of the computer, because the computer is just metal and glass and wires.
Well, you know what is a good analogy is when you have a dream and your mind constructs these places and these people and these situations. What is it made of? It's not solid. So it's that kind of non-solid energy or phenomenon that we have that, we live with every day.
Yeah, and it's hiding in plain sight. And so we often forget that there's a mind that behind our experience that is creating our experience itself. So, but the mind then is what we're talking about, that if we don't learn to work with it, it starts to act as an enemy towards us. So think of the mind also as this incredible quantum computer that was delivered to your home without instructions. So you have this one of the most powerful objects in the universe, but you don't know what to do with it.
Well, or that your relative, your parents gave you this and told you how they used it, and we're kind of borrowing what we've been taught how to use our mind, or how to be in the world and how to think about things.
Yeah, well, certainly from neuroscience, from Eastern philosophy, from consciousness studies, we know now that this mind is the most incredible thing that you can experience. In other words, you were given the biggest treasure in the universe. You were given it, and there's no payment for it. There's no charge for it. It's
free.
We're freely given. It can do whatever you want it to do. It's limitless, but you need to know how to work with it, because otherwise it's going to act like an enemy. It's almost like that story you told me of the genie with a dog and the curly tail.
Yeah, this is a great story. This man said to the guru, "I hear you can give me a genie." And the guru's like, "You don't want a genie." He's like, I do. I want a genie so I can have all my wishes come true. And he's like, I don't know if you're ready to have a genie. And he said, the guy begged him, please, please, please. He said, okay, you have to keep giving the genie something to create, or it's going to hurt you or try to kill you. So you have to really always give it something to create, always give it something to give to you. And the guy's like, oh my God, I have so many things I want. Like, I'll never run out of things I want. So he's like, okay, but if you run into trouble, find me, because, this is a big responsibility. So he takes the genie, and the genie makes him, gives him a beautiful house. And then he's like, well, I'd like to own the whole town. And then he owns the whole town. And then it just goes on where he has everything he ever wanted, the most beautiful wife and kids. And, everyone loves him, and he has money. And then he's like, okay, I think I'm good. And the genie's like, give me more, give me more. And he's like, I don't need anything else. And the genie starts wanting to kill him. And so he's chasing him and, saying, you have to give me something or I'm going to kill you. And he gets the guru, and the guru says, listen, I want you to find a dog with a curly tail, and I want you to cut off the tail, poor dog, and I want you to give it to the genie and tell the genie, I want you to straighten out this tail. And you give him a brush and you straighten out this tail. That's your job. And the genie's like, great, I have something to do. So he straightens out the tail, and he straightens it out. And then once he lets it go, it curls up again. So then the genie always has something to do. Mm-hmm. And it's always this kind of constant, but at least he's busy. But in a way, if we're not creating actively in our life is like that curly tail. It's always like, I'm creating something, and then it goes back into place again. Creating something, trying to straighten out my life here or there, but then it goes back in place. And we just kind of feel satisfied with that, but that we are on this treadmill in life of recreating the same thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting metaphor. Mm-hmm. Yes. So how do we do this? How do we start to work with our mind
and break that kind of almost like, how do we use the desire to keep growing without making it a burden?
Yeah, and there's an element we have to understand first. One is that we are, let's say we're working with higher knowledge in really working with our mind, because higher knowledge, the way we define it, and the way it's defined in some philosophies, it's knowledge that teaches you about the true nature of yourself, meaning about consciousness, awareness. Lower knowledge is knowledge of the appearance of things, the objects of the world, other people, other things, things we see, the multiplicity of experiences. So higher knowledge is the key. You need higher knowledge, meaning you need to understand, who am I? What is the true nature of this experience that I call my mind, my awareness? And how do I discipline it? And here's where a lot of people resist, because discipline, they think, is restriction. Right? We were all kind of conditioned to think that discipline means limitation, restriction. But it's paradoxical. It's the opposite. Discipline of the mind and through higher knowledge means liberation of the mind. It's the only way to free your mind. If you never work with it, if you think, no, freedom and liberation is about doing anything I want and not applying myself in this particular direction in a disciplined way.
It's like a commitment almost to something.
Yes. They think that's freedom. They think that's liberation. That only will lead to you experiencing the mind as an enemy again. The mind itself will turn against you and it hurts you.
So what you're saying is that when we're not disciplined or committed, the mind has the power, and it's just like taking us for a ride. But when we discipline ourselves, we can actually discipline the mind. Like we're basically, with the discipline and commitment, we're taking control. Like we're taking back the reins versus where we think freedom is like, oh, let's just everything do what do we do. So this is about taking the reins and disciplining the mind, not limiting our experience, but through disciplining the mind, we will be able to have freedom.
Right, because higher knowledge teaches us that the senses will drive the mind if you don't discipline it. Mm-hmm. In other words, the appearance of things will dominate your mind and drive you, compel you to act in a certain way. You'll always be seeking that truth, that satisfaction, that happiness outside of yourself, because the senses are pointing outward. So we're always wanting more. And we think that if I have more, or the particular things will make me happy and fulfilled.
Well, it's like, chasing a mirage. You don't have that discipline of the mind, and you're just chasing these mirages of happiness that appear externally.
That's right.
And then you feel like, oh, I'm free, but you're not really free. You're tied to the delusion that the mind is playing with you.
Yes, and let's say the difficulty or the harmful consequences are not in the objects themselves. It's in our attitude towards them,
our attachment toward them,
our attachment, and our false assumption that those things will make us happy. That's what hurts us. It's not that the mind is bad or turning bad or acting as an enemy just because we're not paying attention to it. It's simply that we're paying the wrong attention to things. We're thinking the external is real. This is where the Upanishads say you mistake the unreal for the real and the unreal for the real. No, did I say
the real
that?
For the unreal.
Yeah, the
Yes.
reverse, right?
Yeah, and so that's the what keeps us trapped is that we are not free to choose because the mind is choosing for us what to like, what should we be drawn to, how do we act even. They even in neuroscience they discovered that we aren't even conscious of our own decisions. We think we're conscious of them, but our brain has already processed 8 seconds the decision before we're conscious of it. So we're being run by this mind that is controlling us. Yeah. And that is not freedom. It's and it doesn't have a discipline. So it's like letting a child drive your car.
Yes.
Like a 3-year-old who decides, "Ooh, ice cream store, let's go and crash it." Doesn't have the discipline and the structure and the experience to.
Yes. And so given the forces that are arrayed against us, they're not really against us, all right, but the challenges that we face.
They cause us to suffer unnecessarily.
They cause us to suffer, and given that the obstacles or the challenge that is in front of us as this mind, we need a discipline. In other words, we need a structure that takes us through that transformation to finding the true self, to arriving at the true conclusion of the nature of our true self. If we don't have that methodology, that system, we'll waste most of our time because our life is not that long. We don't have 1,000 years. At most we have 100 years maybe. Let's be generous. 100 years to do this. And if you do not use a discipline, a methodology, a philosophy of self-realization, you will waste most of the time in trial and error. Therefore, it's essential that you find a discipline that works for you. Again, because the remember the Vedas are saying that all the paths will lead you to the same place. You will find self-realization, but you have to follow that path. You cannot be digging shallow holes and expect to find that water and create that deep well.
Well, I think the reason why, and I know for myself that the reason why people do dig the shallow holes is because discipline in your spiritual beliefs, your philosophy takes courage, and it's challenging at times. And if we're not disciplined, we're going to give up when things get hard. Like, I really don't like this concept. I'm going to go here. My mother used to call me a smorgasbord Catholic. You pick this, but you leave this behind. And it's like you're half in one religion and you're half in this philosophy. And it gets, anytime it gets uncomfortable, the ego's saying, okay, why don't you try that little magical workshop that they take all your problems away in one day, and you're looking for that one thing that's going to like enlighten you. And we're all looking for that quick fix. It's kind of part of our culture, like that instant gratification. And spiritual discipline is a longer process. And telling us things that we're not comfortable hearing, and so we want to dispel it, and we want to find something that's easier to believe in. And then we end up really not getting anywhere, because that discomfort is actually leading us to transformation and to the next level. And if we never hit that next level, we're just, bouncing around. And that's why it's the ego's, we're not consciously trying to do this. The ego's always like, hey, look over here. This fancy object over here, let me grab it, and shiny object, it's going to be the answer to all my suffering. And we end up never really sticking to a plan. But like you said, that discovery is necessary. First, we have to dig some shallow holes and figure out what we believe and who we are, and really have a direct experience. But then we have to commit. And usually the time that we want to change is when things get hard. And we just have to be aware of that, and that we're going to stick through this. This is uncomfortable hearing. I don't know if I believe it, let me test it out, versus, oh, I don't like this, let me run and find something else.
Yes. Yeah, and here we're not talking necessarily religion, although some religions, of course, are the carriers or the guardians of certain spiritual philosophies. But we are talking about these spiritual philosophies as methodologies of transformation. That is a way for the human being to be able to transcend their ego structure, the framework of their individuality. Every human being needs to do that initially, because that gives you your sense of self, your identity. But at the same time, every individual has to transcend it in midlife somewhere. And midlife, of course, varies, but at some point in your life, you have to be able to transcend it. Otherwise, you're locked into your personal conditioning. And that is a very claustrophobic, limiting way of existing. That's why people can't stand it. Then consciousness becomes a burden to them. They don't know what to do with the mind. They've acquired everything that the world says you need to be happy, but they're unhappy. It's not enough. They want more. And they think, well, maybe if I get more, then I'll be happy. But they find that that's not happening.
And when you're digging shallow holes, your ego has always an out. It's always misleading. It's something out there, something I'm going to get, or even like I'm going to ascend to a different level of awareness that is going to magically erase all my problems. More, with Jung's work, it's about integration. It's like, how do I integrate this human self with all its, foibles, and then our true spiritual nature? How do we live as a spiritual being in a human body? How do we integrate versus escape? And the ego wants to escape all the time. It wants to find the next thing, abandon this one to go to the next one. And you'll find that if it's not liberating you long term, like if you feel like you're not being liberated, then it's probably the path you're either not disciplined on your path, or you're not going toward it fully.
Yeah.
If you just take part of it, like, oh, I like this part, but I don't like that part.
Yeah. So when somebody asks you, how do I find that one path? How do I choose that one path? Yeah. What would you say?
I think that you set the intention first, that you're looking for a path for the rest of your life, like something that that you can stick with. And deep inside of you somewhere is already that knowledge. And so you're asking yourself, you just set the intention that you're seeking it, meditate on it. And then there's something like like hard to describe, but it's like your soul speaks to you in a way, as it has a resonance to it that's like, this feels right. And that's, you get in touch with that first. And then when you go out looking at paths, reading different spiritual books, there's something that goes, your soul goes, oh, hello, this is it. And so it feels right. Is that the way for you too? It's just almost like when I read the Gita the first time, it was kind of confusing and I didn't understand a lot of it. But there was something that like my soul was like, there's something here. And it almost is like pulls you in, like your soul is like pulling you in. So you don't have to do it all consciously. You can listen to yourself and your deeper self. And the more intimate you are with yourself, the more you'll know that path is true. And you'll know it's not true if you're always in fear, anxiety, if the path feeds fear and anxiety in you, like you're something terrible is going to happen if you don't do something right. Like that sounds like more like an ego-based philosophy versus that you're one with everything. You're powerful. The answers are inside of you. That kind of sense of peace that finding that deeper truth really brings up.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, so because, again, we were going on the basis that the wise call it by many names, there is no right or wrong way to do it. It's what works for you. That's the incredible gift that the universe has given us. In giving us a mind, we're free to choose. But that's also the challenge, right? Because when we're free to choose, we like to pick and choose from many different traditions, and that messes us up. We need to discipline our mind. Therefore, choosing that one path is important because of that reason.
Like the fundamentals of what you want to believe at the core, and then those other things, the rituals and the path that they're taking you on. Does that resonate with the core of your? Yeah. Like one of our core that is everything is consciousness. So if everything's consciousness, there's no separation, and then anything that's dualistic feels not in alignment with that philosophy, and then you're not easily led into the storm of the mind, saying, "Oh, this sounds like a good idea. Let's try this."
Yeah, there's a couple of principles that apply to all of us. One is that it is not about figuring it out. In other words, so many of us are, because we're conditioned to think that cognition is the key to everything, right? If we understand it and we figure it out, we'll be okay. But and this comes from the Upanishads themselves. It says the mind cannot go there. In other words, you cannot figure it out. It's not a formula, an intellectual.
Think it out, right?
Yeah, an intellectual exercise that will get you there. We do need to think, of course. We use the mind to take us to the edge of the river, but then we have to cross the river without the mind. We have to leave it behind, and that's kind of a big challenge for us. And that's precisely why we need a methodology. If we don't have a proper method, we'll find a reason not to give up the ego, not give up the mind, right? Because
or there's a fear
we're so
around
attached
giving
to
up.
it.
Yeah,
it's an intense experience. But that's a universal principle. Almost all the true spiritual methods teach this, that it is not about figuring it out. It is about transcending your mind, your individual mind.
And yeah, it's that, like I said, that feeling that if you know yourself intimately beyond the thoughts, this pure awareness that's with you, your secret silent partner that's like enjoying life without being tainted by it, the true self has already that knowledge. So it's not like it's out there that you have to gain. It's more like to realize it's already there, and realize and remember the who you are, and that's really the case. And because we're so caught up in ego, because we build up a persona, we need to do shadow work. And Jung's path is really a great outline for individuation of how we find that path. But we first have to get our ego out of the way. And you can't just like say, I don't want to get I'm just not going to pay attention to my thoughts. There's a process of facing your shadow, going through that transformation, and then going into the deeper realms and aspects of yourself that are profound and wise, that are waiting for you to guide.
Yeah, because we can say that Jungian psychology is the only psychology that addresses this question. Like, what is going on when an individual is going through this transformation that we call spirituality? So he says what is happening is you are de-identifying with your persona, with your ego, and understanding that principle that you were talking about, that you are already this self. You already have the treasure. The mind awareness or consciousness is the treasure that you're looking for in the objects of the world. But it's already you. There's nothing you need to be doing, essentially.
You're already enlightened.
Yes.
You just forgot.
Yes.
This is ego's just covering it over. Like it's like the wisdom and everything's there already. Your ego's just covering it over. It's not, I have to go and do all these rituals and training to get to this spiritual knowledge. But in a way, we have to take our ego through the process to untie ourselves from the ego. There's a process, and it's not just, wave a magic wand, call a genie up and say, take all my problems away. It's a discipline to face the parts of ourself that we pushed away, that we deny, that we've rejected, and integrate them back in. And then through that wholeness, we get to see more of who we are, versus I need to get rid of things. It's more like, how do I integrate and stop pushing things away? And how do I accept all of everything in life? Integration, wholeness. That's what wholeness is. It's not dropping pieces away. It's about bringing everything together. Yeah. So this is a great topic today. We hope you enjoyed this, and please subscribe to our podcast, Soul Sessions with Creative Mind, if you haven't done so already. And we'll see you next week.
See you soon.
Take care.
Stay well.